The Overlords had conquered countless worlds, each one falling faster than the last. Their fleet, an unbreakable armada, had turned empires to dust. They had expected Earth to crumble just as easily. It hadn't. Instead, they faced something they had never encountered before, not just resistance, but defiance beyond reason. They had faced organized militaries before. They had crushed them with superior firepower, dismantled their defenses, and broken their leaders. But this was different. This was not war as they understood it. This was something older, something raw. The reports made no sense at first. A lone human, fighting without modern weapons, carving through their forces with steel and fury. It was impossible. And yet, their dead littered the snow. Erik Thorsson did not fight like a soldier. He did not follow doctrine or strategy. He fought the way his ancestors had, relentless, merciless, a force of nature given flesh. The Overlords relied on their technology, their shields, their numbers. None of it mattered when the fight closed to arm's reach. Their weapons were built for ranged combat, their armor designed to withstand plasma fire. A sword, swung with enough strength, could shatter the joints in their suits. An axe, driven with purpose, could split their helmets in two. A hunting party of Overlords moved carefully through the frostbitten forest, their sensors scanning every movement. They had been told this would be an easy conquest. Now they moved with hesitation, their fingers twitching on the triggers of weapons designed to end wars. But against him, wars meant nothing. The first fell without a sound, his throat opened by an unseen blade. The second turned just in time to see the glint of an axe before it crushed his skull. The rest fired wildly into the dark, but Erik was already gone. He was never where they expected. He struck from the shadows, from above, from below. He fought like a demon out of their nightmares. They tried to adapt. They reinforced their patrols, doubled their numbers, sent war machines designed to root out survivors. But he was not a survivor. He was the predator, and they were in his territory now. He learned their patterns, their weaknesses, the moments when their guard dropped. He struck only when he knew he would win. And he always won. Bodies piled up. Morale plummeted. The Overlords did not know fear, not until now. Their commanders ordered them to hold position, to regroup, to fortify. But no fortress could stop him. No plan could counter him. They had come as conquerors. Now they were the prey. The Overlords had never known desperation. Their empire had expanded without resistance for centuries, their rule unchallenged. But now, something was different. Something was wrong. Their troops, bred for discipline, were beginning to hesitate. Their commanders, forged in countless campaigns, spoke in hushed tones. No one wanted to say it, but they all felt it. The tide had shifted. They stopped underestimating him. No more small patrols, no more careless scouting parties. They brought the full weight of their arsenal down upon the frozen wasteland. High-altitude drones patrolled the skies, scanning every movement below. Pulse-wave cannons leveled entire forests, erasing any possible hiding spots. They set traps, deployed trackers, flooded the land with machines that did not tire, did not fear, did not question. But Erik had no intention of hiding. When their forces pushed deeper into the frozen valleys, he was already waiting. They believed their technology made them untouchable, that their armor and numbers ensured victory. But war was not won by machines alone. War was won by those who refused to break. The first trap was simple: pressure-rigged explosives buried beneath the snow, scavenged from their own fallen. When the lead mech stepped forward, the ground erupted in fire and steel. The explosion sent shockwaves through the ranks, toppling soldiers, shattering their formations. Before they could recover, the attack had already begun. Erik moved like a phantom through the chaos. He struck fast, cutting through their ranks before vanishing into the storm. A blade through the joints of an exosuit, an axe cleaving through reinforced plating. Their energy weapons hummed and screeched, lighting up the darkness, but they fired at ghosts. By the time their soldiers hit the ground, he was already onto the next. The Overlords did not retreat. Their kind had never fled from battle. But now, they did not advance either. They stood amidst the wreckage of their own machines, surrounded by the bodies of the fallen, waiting for another strike that would come too fast to stop. Their weapons were useless if they couldn't see their enemy, if they couldn't react in time. The longer the battle stretched on, the more they realized, this wasn't just a fight. This was a reckoning. They sent their strongest, their elites, warriors who had conquered entire worlds. It made no difference. Their armor cracked under the force of steel, their bodies broken by sheer, relentless brutality. This was not a war of strategy, not a war of numbers. This was a test of will. And theirs had begun to fracture. Some stopped following orders. Some refused to leave the safety of their camps. These were not cowards. They had been raised for war, trained to face the worst the galaxy had to offer. But nothing in their existence had prepared them for this. A man who would not stop, who could not be reasoned with, who fought as though death itself had no claim on him. They had thought Earth would fall in days. Now, they whispered of the one who would not die. The Overlords' resolve was beginning to crumble. They had expected to crush Earth's resistance with ease, but a single human warrior had turned the tide, and their unyielding strategy was failing. No matter how many troops they deployed or how many machines they sent to hunt him down, Erik Thorsson was always one step ahead, his relentless attacks sowing chaos and fear in their ranks. It became clear to the Overlords that they were facing something entirely new, a force of nature they could not quantify, a warrior who was fighting with a ferocity they had never encountered before. Their leaders called for reinforcements. They summoned the largest warships in their fleet, prepared to unleash orbital bombardments and reduce entire cities to ash in order to reclaim control. But even this did not guarantee success. Their ships could wipe out vast portions of the land, but they could not erase the human spirit that refused to break. Erik's attacks had shown them their biggest weakness, their reliance on technology. Their greatest weapon was their machines, yet against an opponent who knew how to use the terrain to his advantage, those machines became useless. The Overlords' drones, mechs, and advanced sensors were all designed to detect movement in the open, but they were blind to the natural world around them. And in the ice, the snow, and the storm, Erik was a shadow, a phantom they could not track, an unstoppable force hidden in the very elements they could not control. Desperation began to take hold. The Overlords began looking to their most advanced technology, experimental weapons designed for situations where traditional methods had failed. These weapons were designed for a single purpose: to annihilate anything that threatened their dominance. Erik, however, had no intention of simply being eradicated. He had fought too long, too hard, to be snuffed out by their final desperation. He would take this war to the very heart of their invincibility. He had always known their weakness was not in their firepower, but in their mindset. The Overlords had never been forced to fight like this. They were conquerors, yes, but they did not know how to survive. They fought in ways they had been programmed to fight, in ways that allowed them to dominate. They had forgotten what it meant to bleed, to fight for survival, to outlast an enemy who would not yield. They had never faced a warrior who embodied that survival instinct to the fullest. The Overlords began to question their own certainty. Even their most seasoned warriors, equipped with the finest combat systems, had been reduced to nothing more than corpses. How could one human, alone and seemingly outmatched, continue to destroy them? Their fear grew, feeding off their failures. The once unshakable commanders now began to doubt the success of the mission. The human warrior was more than a threat. He was a nightmare they could not escape. As more of their elite troops fell to the relentless assault, a cold truth began to settle in: Earth would not fall to them. Not now, not ever. Their pride, their hubris, had led them to this point. And it was now unraveling before them. The more they pressed forward, the more they realized that each step they took was a step closer to their own demise. Erik Thorsson had become something of a symbol, a living testament to the power of will and survival against the most technologically advanced empire the galaxy had ever known. There would be no victory for the Overlords. And they knew it. The Overlords' empire was crumbling beneath the weight of their failures. Their fleets, once the terror of the galaxy, had been stretched too thin. Their technology, once unstoppable, was now useless against an enemy who fought without rules or hesitation. Erik Thorsson had become the nightmare they could not escape, and every attempt to annihilate him only seemed to fuel his strength. As their forces dwindled, the Overlords were forced to confront a grim reality. Victory was no longer an option. In desperation, they turned to the final measure of their arrogance. Their ultimate weapon, a colossal warship capable of obliterating entire cities with a single strike. This ship was not just a weapon, It was a symbol of their power, their last hope to quell the human uprising and restore their dominance. They launched the vessel, with the full expectation that it would turn the tide in their favor, erasing the memory of their defeats and annihilating the human resistance in one final, overwhelming assault. But even as they prepared to unleash their weapon, a nagging fear lingered. They had already seen their greatest fighters fall, their most advanced machines shattered. Their overwhelming firepower had proven ineffective against the relentless guerrilla tactics of a single human. How could they be certain that this weapon, this last hope, would succeed where everything else had failed? Erik Thorsson knew what the Overlords were planning. He had always known. He understood their need for control, their reliance on overwhelming firepower. He had seen their arrogance, their belief that victory was guaranteed as long as they had the superior technology. And now, as they launched their final weapon, he prepared for the one confrontation that would determine the fate of Earth. It wasn't just the ship itself that Erik had to contend with, it was everything the Overlords represented. They were conquerors who had never known defeat, rulers of an empire built on fear and subjugation. They had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had found a warrior who could not be reasoned with, a human who refused to bow. And now they would see what happens when the forces of tyranny face the might of a single individual who would rather die than surrender. Erik didn't need an army. He didn't need a fleet. He didn't need weapons of mass destruction. All he needed was his resolve, his understanding of the land, and his unyielding desire to protect his people and his planet. The Overlords had come with their ships and their armies, thinking they could crush the heart of humanity. They had underestimated the power of one man who refused to be broken. As the warship descended toward the planet's surface, Erik was already there, waiting. He didn't run, he didn't hide. The Overlords had made their mistake, and now they would pay the price. Their final weapon, their ultimate expression of power, was about to meet the same fate as everything else they had brought to Earth. Destroyed, not by the might of armies, but by the will of a single human. The Overlords had never believed they could be defeated. But now, in the face of a warrior who would not yield, they realized that they were not the conquerors. They were the ones who had been conquered. Their empire, their technology, and their arrogance had all fallen in the face of one man's unbreakable resolve. Erik Thorsson had fought not just for survival, but for the survival of humanity itself. And in that fight, he had won. The Overlords had come to Earth to conquer. Instead, they had become the ones who were conquered.